So you can see that after I transferred mine, I decided the background looked too busy and I want the focus to be on my main image, which is the seahorse. So I erased those pencil lines that had the wavy, spirally lines on the background, and I changed it to just be one continuous wavy line. So my contrast can be between a dark border. I'm going to cut out the background, the negative space around the seahorse, so that the seahorse becomes the focal point, which will be the positive space. And then I will cut out these, or I will carve away these little rectangular designs going inside. Now that I know what my blades will do as far as the width and the shape of the grooves, I know that my 5 blade is going to be the wider spaces, the 3 gets narrow, the 2 is even narrower, and the 1 is for the fine details. I'm going to, okay, so I have my block stop against the table and I have my linoleum up against this, and I can move my linoleum in different ways, whatever makes it easier for me to carve it, just as long as it is pushed up against the edge of the block stop to where whenever I am holding my tool, I'm not going to cut into my hand. So I remember that my 5 blade makes the wide lines, so I am going to start very slowly and controlled, wiggling and carving out this negative space. So remember that you hold your tool horizontal with your finger pressed against where the blade is connecting in. You never want to hold it in a way that is going to break the tool or hurt yourself. And you are using slow and controlled movements. Remember that you can brush this away, whatever you cut out. You can also kind of tap it against the side. You want to be careful though, because these blades can break, so you want to be careful with that. But you will slowly go around, maybe focus on a borderline of something that you want to carve away. Know that if you carve too much, your block may break, and if it does, I'll just have to give you linoleum. You have this much thickness that you can carve away from. Our samples on the back are pretty shallow. They're not very deep, so that shouldn't impact it. But when you are carving out the negative space, wherever that is on your design, you want to make sure that you're not getting so thin into this that your block breaks in half. Remember to go slow and controlled. If you cut out something that you weren't anticipating cutting, it's okay. Do the best with what you can. You can move your block in different ways, just as long as it's pressed up against the block stop and you are keeping your fingers out of the way of this tool. So we'll continue using the 5 until it gets to an area where we feel like we need a little bit more detail work, but the 5 is really good for getting these large areas. Also notice that whenever I'm cutting this out, I am following the directional path of the line that I want my cut to look like. So instead of having random cuts, some going horizontal, some going vertical, I am following the path of my wavy line, just in case these lines become visible whenever I print them out. I want it to look intentional. I want my lines to look like it's part of the overall design, instead of me just trying to rush through this and being excited to cut this stuff up. Keep everything secure and calm and sigma and aura and beta. And no skibbity. We want no skibbity in this. Okay, I finished number 5 blade. Notice that I just kept to my big smooth areas, my outlines that don't require much detail work. I didn't go too deep because I don't want to potentially break my linoleum, and if you get curious and start flexing it and bend it, you might end up snapping it in half. So please be careful that you are treating this with care so that you can get a finished product that you're proud of. Whenever I'm carving it away, it turns a lighter pink color, which is nice because it kind of shows you that difference between your positive space and the negative space. But I am having a hard time getting into some of these detail areas, so I'm going to switch to a different blade, which Miss Brenner will do for you. But for now, I already have one that is changed to a 3 blade. So I'm going to make sure that I'm holding it carefully. My number will always face down toward the linoleum. And I am going to try to do a little bit more detail work. And I'm going a little slower because this will cut it quicker and sharper, and it's going to get a lot deeper since it has that big groove. Actually, I'm going to compare this level 3 with a 2. The 2 has even more of a point, so it's going to have a narrower ability to get some of the details. So I think I'm going to go ahead and stick with my 3 and just really be careful that I'm not getting too deep when I'm cutting this, because it has more of a point, so more of a way that it can gouge out the rubber. You can also turn this to the side, the tool, and you can kind of get some of that information, some of those things taken out. But if you wiggle your tool, you're going to get little zigzag lines. So if you like that, that's great. If you don't, that at the very end, we can clean up some of those lines when we do the test. So I'm going to now do a time-lapse video of how this number 3 blade will look. Now I think I've finished what I want to do with the 3 blade. I'm switching to a level 2 because it is even more fine of a point. The V shape is narrower, so I can get even more details in here. This is going to be tricky for me to get the negative space of this eyeball. I'm going to have to go really slow and controlled. One thing I want to point out is if it ever feels like your blade is loose, let me know and I can help you tighten it, but you tighten a little bit around this because it clamps down around the blade. But if you're going to do something that has a spiral, you have to go very slow and stop to move your linoleum. You can stand up. I would probably actually suggest standing while you're doing this, because the more that you can press your linoleum against the block stop, the more secure your project will be, so you don't accidentally gouge into places that you're not wanting to have removed. So did the eyeball. I don't know how rough that's going to look. I'm going to have to do a print check to see. Now I have to decide. I have this this line here. All of this would be a positive space. So I want to show a separation between the seahorse body and this line. So I'm going to actually cut away this line. So now that will remain white, and whatever I have carved out is going to be the color of the ink, which for us will be black and potentially some other colors. But now I'm trying to work in cutting out some of these rectangle blocks, which will be a little bit tricky to get inside of here. So I may have to do some of this with this number May have to adjust my shape a little bit. And then I may have to switch up and try a number 5 or a 3 if it gets too hard for me to get clean lines with this. So now I'll do a time lapse. The big key to this project is going slow. I see some lines that I'm probably going to have to clean up. They're probably going to be a little too messy. And I could do some of that with my number 1 at the very end. These are pretty small, but using a 1 blade is not going to get much information out because the blade is so tiny. I might put that in here and then test it to see if it even works. Because you have to have enough negative space removed that the ink doesn't go into those areas. So that's kind of the trick with that. Now, cleaning this off, you can kind of tap this and make sure that I don't have any of the shavings inside of it. I could tell I'm going to have to do some cleanup work for sure. All of these shavings need to go in the trash can. If they get into the floor, it's okay. We just have a broom and we need to make sure that we clean it up. So you can take all of your shavings, have it on your stop block, or dust it off onto your stop block. Can't even see this. Dust off the shavings onto your stop block and then take that over to the trash can. If you get shavings on the floor, please just get one of the brooms and clean that up. Make sure you have nothing left inside of it, and then I'll show you how to do a test print.